live on YouTube now.
Okay,
I'll just mention a couple of things we've got coming up and then we'll get started. Just
perfect.
give people a time to join. And hopefully you can introduce yourself at the beginning because
Sure.
we're going to save this video later. We're going to cut me out of the beginning. It'll just throw to
Okay,
you.
perfect. Good.
Uh, um, so besides this, September 12th, building a culture of success. September 19th, so a week from now, securing government funding with Geneva. On September 26th, Mark Dickinson's back. We're talking about from self-sabotage to triumph, the difference between to-dos and tasks for startup excellence and, performance and moving forward. September 28th is our monthly startup investor drinks here in Toronto. If you're ever in town, let me know, Mike. We'll definitely get you out to one of our live events if you're here. It's open bar, pizza, open pitch, so people can pitch for up to 20 seconds in front of the crowd. We get investors, we get founders, we get ecosystem partners. It's a lot of fun. We have a bunch of exciting partners coming this time. Futurepreneur, Clearco, Oot, OnTab, and a bunch of others. You can talk to them about all sorts of stuff. We've got so many other things. That's just like 4 or 5. The list goes well past this page. I don't really want to get into it a lot. I just want to let people know we've got lots of stuff coming on. Most of this stuff is free except for our drink events. So come on out and registers for these because it's important for you, 1, to be part of a community, and 2, to continually challenge yourself and learning more and push yourself forward. So, Mike Simmons, are you ready to get started?
I am ready to get started.
Well, over to you, sir.
All right. I'm going to go back and forth between sharing a screen. I'm going to pull up a slide that just has some general introduction type stuff, kind of background on me. Again, we'll go back and forth. Let's keep this interactive. I know we've got a couple of different people who will be active in the chat as we go through this. I've got a whiteboard. I'm not afraid to use it. We'll use it as we go through the discussion today. And as a focus, we're going to focus on building a culture of success. Specifically look at building that culture of success from the front line. My name is Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst X. Launched the business back in 2015 with a co-founder. Co-founder exited the business in 2018, and I've kept things moving along, and we've gone through a couple of different iterations. Like any other startup entrepreneur, you go through these S curves. I've had a great opportunity to both learn in the W2 space, where I made a name for myself in enterprise sales and sales leadership inside ed tech companies like O'Reilly Media. I cut my teeth in ed tech with a company called Skillsoft. What gets me excited is leveraging technology to enable humans to do better human things. If you are interested in going a little bit deeper into the content, you can check me out on the Find My Catalyst podcast. Episode 348 went live earlier this month. Our core focus today, we're going to break the session into 3 key parts. One area we'll focus on is investing in leadership at the front line. What does that look like? How do we enable and develop leaders from the front line? James Kerr said this in the book Legacy: leaders create leaders. And I would leverage it. I would use an iteration of that and say leaders build leaders. We as leaders inside our organization have an obligation to help build that next level of leadership inside the business. And I believe it starts at the front line. We'll talk about the importance of gaining focus through clarity. And then we'll wrap up with some discussion around building out your operating system inside the organization. And people will probably be familiar with some of the terms we'll use a little bit later, like MBOs, OKRs, Some might be familiar with EOS or MIND methodology, and I'll share a bit around the operating system that I use, a Catalyst that we develop and have deployed inside organizations, which is our game plan, goal setting and execution through clarity and focus. So for those in the chat, where do you invest in leaders today? If you could just an A, B, or C for investing A at the executive level, B at the director level, or C at the front line. Where do you typically invest in your leadership today? Awesome. John, that's great. It's good to see people investing in the front line. That frontline leadership is so important inside organizations. You think about the people that are engaged with with customers, the people who, both internal and external customers, the people who are doing the work on a day in, day out basis. I'll ask another question. Do you think that that's typical? Is it typical that organizations are investing in leadership at the front line? Yeah,
I don't
would
think
agree.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. John, Craig, I would agree, and I think it's a miss. Unfortunately, we've got a situation where what we struggle with, and I'm going to turn the presentation off so that we can get back to going on to the whiteboard. But we've got a situation where we understand the importance of investing in leadership and building leaders, but we tend to focus more time, energy, and attention on executives or next level leaders inside our organization. Then we wonder why our employees, why people inside our organization struggle with some really important skills like problem solving, decision making, effective communication. And what I would challenge you to think differently about, and it's good to have someone like John in here who already is investing in the front line, is if you invest in your frontline employees and you help them build out systems that improve problem solving, decision making, and communication, it will pay off dividends throughout the rest of the organization. You will not get yourself into a situation where you promote people inside the organization and they don't have those leadership skills because you would have been developing and cultivating them over a period of time. One of the challenges I see in organizations that I've been fortunate enough to work with is we promote people into leadership roles, and then we expect them to know how to lead. We forget how much time and energy and resource and how many mistakes we've all made as leaders in various leadership roles inside organizations that we've had an opportunity to work in. We forget how long it's taken us to build out that capability. So as we think about building our skill set and building our capability, one of the things I would do is challenge you to think a bit differently about how you invest in your team in building problem-solving capabilities. What kind of framework do you use in order to help inform problem solving? How do you get better at reducing bias and reducing blind spots and creating a level of focus? Now, I've got a framework that I use, a problem-solving framework that is something that originally started as an account plan framework. So you could use this both from a sales perspective in the way that you interact with customers. You could also use it in when thinking about addressing problems that you have inside your organization. And I'm just going to go up to the whiteboard here quickly. The first thing we want to do is we want to highlight what? Let's actually define the problem. Let's define the problem. And Craig, please let me know if any questions come up in the chat as we're going through this. What's the specific problem that we're looking to solve for? Let's define that problem. Now, one of the challenges that people will have is they define that problem a bit too broad. So we have to deconstruct the problem, really kind of narrow our focus, be super clear around what the definition is of the specific problem that we're looking to solve. The next set of questions that I would get into and that I get into are who? Like, who has the problem? Think about clients that you support. You've developed your product, your service, you deliver it to the market. You've identified a problem statement that you're solving for in the marketplace. You should know who who out there in the world has the problem. The next question you want to know is, who is impacted by the problem? Now, depending on the type of sales you have, that person who has the problem and is impacted by the problem might actually be the same person. But typically when you're selling in the B2B space, there's someone who has the problem, and then there's a separate group who are impacted by that problem. And then the third level of who is, who cares? Who cares about the people who have the problem or are impacted by the problem? When we understand the people that are involved in this, then we can gain a better perspective on why it's important to solve the problem. And I'm going to move over to the other side. You'll see this will start to look like a hexagon. Why does the problem persist? And why is it important to solve? The challenge I would suggest that you think about inside your organizations, with not only with your customers, so external customers, internal customers, how you're collaborating across teams, how you're helping people think differently about problem solving, is see how many people can go through those 3 questions related to a specific problem that you're trying to solve before they move into how. Typically, what ends up happening is we jump right from what to how. We just want to go what to how, what to how. We hear a problem, we want to go solve it. We hear a problem, we want to go solve it. If you've not covered these top 3 areas from a problem solving perspective, you've not earned the right to get into a discussion around how. If you're not going through these questions, you're not getting to a point where you're improving perspective. You're getting yourself into a situation where you're creating other blind spots, whether those are intentionally or unintentionally. I think too often we as leaders highlight the importance of going really, really fast, and we lose track of maintaining focus on speed to impact. By asking these questions, we can create those little speed bumps that will help ensure that we're actually making progress toward the objective. We're making progress toward the thing that we want to actually solve for. Then we can get into things like when, so timing. And then last piece is short-term, medium-term, long-term planning. What's our 30, 60, 90? If, again, going through each of the questions, what problem, who are the people? Those who have the problem are impacted by the problem or care about those who have or are impacted by the problem. Why? Why does it persist? Why is it important to solve? What's the actual business impact? How are they solving today? How would we solve it differently? And we've earned the right to get there. When? What's the timing? And then short-term, medium-term, long-term. What are our next steps that we're actually going to take? We think about this in the context of 3 days, 6 days, 9 days, 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 9 minutes, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or the typical way that we look at these things, 30, 60, 90. What's our 30, 60, 90? And that's all about project planning, project planning and working through the process. I'm going to pause just for a second. Craig, ask you if you have any questions directly related to this, or what your thoughts are on a framework like this to help improve problem solving.
Well, I was just thinking that this is something that I want to introduce, never mind into other organizations, but into Toronto Starts as a whole. We have volunteers, we have new people coming in, and if we don't establish the why, they won't make the right decisions in the flow of the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that, because that's, I think, was highlighted to me that most of our conflicts come from people think they're doing the right thing, but we really haven't established the why.
Why have you struggled with the why? What are some typical struggles that you've run into specifically related to the why?
All right, well, I'm going to tell some tales out of school here. So, when we're at an event, it's usually a paid event or something. We have volunteers who are at the door and directing people and whatever. And I tell them, this is what to do. But I don't say, hey, we're Toronto Starts. We're the largest startup community. We're here to help entrepreneurs and active startups and do whatever it takes. So if there is an early stage startup who can't afford it or is serious about whatever, we can let them in. They they don't have to pay. And, you know, bending the rules to align with the fact that we're here to help as many people as possible, yet, you know, not go broke doing it, because most of these events were. And just thinking about those types of things, and that just allows people to go that extra mile to help, versus, you know, this is the rule next, this is the rule next.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the reason why I start with what on here is because typically what I see inside organizations is people will manufacture their own perspective on a why, like why they work inside an organization, or why they do the work that they do, or why they spend time away from their families, or why they like working with their customers, or whatever the why, the why component is that they can rally around. The what should be super clear relative to what the specific problem is that we're looking to solve for. And there's less risk of an emotional response related to what. On the other pieces, we start to get into opinions and perspectives and whatnot. Why? Personal story. How I've done it before, how we've done it before, how I've seen it done before, how we did it at this other organization. We can come together as a team on what, get clarity around the definition, and then start working through the process. What we can do is we could start to identify potential blind spots relative to our perspective on solving the problem. And if we have blind spots and we're not able to answer some of these questions, the who's, the how's, that why that you're talking about, Craig, that shape can no longer hold water. And that starts to identify risk for us as an organization. The more stable we can get these lines, the thicker we can create these barriers, the more solid these are, the stronger our capability as a team becomes relative to problem solving. This problem solving can work in the context of dealing with a specific problem that comes up with a customer. It can work in the context of account planning, like we shared before. It can come up with hey, how do we decide? How do we determine where we want to focus time, energy, and attention? And now I want to give you another tool around decision making. So this is a problem solving tool. There'll be a link at the end where if anybody wants to go to some of the resources that I make available, both in the podcast and YouTube and these frameworks and tools, you'll be able to link to those directly. My mission with this kind of stuff is to help people accelerate simplifying problem solving and decision making so that we can continue to do really meaningful work out in the workplace and build better culture from the front line. And I think we struggle, at least when I see it, I think when I work with earlier employees inside organizations, many times they don't have those tools. They might not have spent time working in the sciences. So they don't really understand the scientific method, or haven't looked at application of a scientific method and building out a hypothesis and then testing against that hypothesis. And by giving some of these tools, you can start to accelerate their view on problem solving. So on the decision-making side, how many people are familiar with the Eisenhower matrix? So the Eisenhower matrix, Covey reintroduced it to everybody in 7 Habits. On one axis, you have importance. So we want
Yes, I know this. I just forgot it was a Heisenberg thing. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
So we have importance. So we might have not important, important. And then on the other one, and actually I did this wrong. On one axis, we have urgency. So it is urgent, not urgent. And then on the other side, the other axis, on the y-axis, we have importance. So importance, and this is going to be high importance. This is going to be not important. And the reason a 2x2 like this works is because we can actually look at a challenge that we're working through, a decision that we have to make through 2 dimensions, which starts to reduce increase perspective and reduce risk. Just like a tool like this, increase perspective, remove blind spots, ultimately help reduce risk. When we're looking at something and we're trying to make a decision on should we do something, so it's both urgent and important. What Eisenhower would have said is do. On important, not urgent, it's decide. On urgent, not important, this might be delegate. And then on not important, not urgent, eliminate. So just a quick 2x2 can go through and start to shift our perspective on, is the work that we're working on, is this thing that we're focused, is the problem that we're actually looking to solve for, where does it fit on this continuum? Is it urgent? Yes or no? Is it important? Yes or no? Where do we start to put our priority? Where do we start to prioritize things? I'm going to give you one more 2x2 to think about. And again, all of this is around that whole first piece where we talk about problem solving and decision making. How do we improve problem solving and decision making? We can improve problem solving through a tool like this. We can improve decision making in a tool like this. Let's say we want to run this through a different set of dimensions, different axis, different criteria. What if we're trying to figure out, is somebody doing meaningful work for them? Is somebody doing the right work inside your organization? The 2x2 I would suggest you use is energy. Does the work that we're having people work on, or the work that you're working on, does it suck the life out of you, negative energy, or does it fill you up, positive energy? Does it give you energy? I know some of the things that suck the life out of me are meetings for the sake of meetings where we talk about the same things over and over again, but we don't actually make any progress on these things. As we go through this, energy, negative sucks the life out of me, positive increases, energy fills me up. The other dimension I'd like to look at, I suggest that you look at, is impact. Is it low impact or high impact? The takeaway from this is more about how can I start to look at some of the decisions I'm making through two distinct dimensions to reduce risk. I could justify doing a bunch of things that are high energy all the time, but I might find that I'm wasting a lot of time doing high energy things that are actually low impact. They might be filling me up internally, but they're not actually delivering value to my customer base. They're not moving the needle inside our organization. By leveraging a 2x2, using two dimensions, we can start to increase perspective and reduce risk. I'm going to ask the group, are there any 2x2s that you use, or do you use 2x2s in your work, or in your decision-making process, in your daily workflow?
I use some of these. I use another method, mostly to decide where to test and what markets to go after, called SPA, which is size, pain, and access.
Okay.
So so it's not a 2x2, but it's a row of 3. So if you're going after this user group, what's the size of the market? What pain are they having, and what access do you have to that group of people to go after?
Right.
And you assign each of those a value of 1 to 3, and you add them up at the end, and it becomes clear which ones you should be looking at.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing about that, Craig, is that you have a tool, you have a framework, you have a way that you can start applying some logic to thinking that ideally removes some of the emotional challenge associated with it. Like, I can justify anything that gives me energy. I can justify anything that's important. I can justify anything that ends up being urgent. When I layer in another criteria, another dimension to start to shift perspective, another speed bump, I can start to ensure that I'm accelerating speed to impact and not overly focused on just going fast from one thing to another. So takeaways from this section. And again, these are frameworks and tools that I make available in the free resources stuff on the website. A problem-solving framework helps you work through the different questions to make sure that you minimize some, gain perspective and minimize blind spots. A 2x2 is another tool that you can use to help inform decision-making criteria. And there's a couple of other ones that other dimensions that you can use. One of the ones that I really like is the process outcome matrix, which comes from Dan John. It on one side, it's can it be improved? Yes or no. And then on the other side is it needed to win? So if it can't be improved and it's needed to win, maybe we're playing the wrong game. Maybe we're operating in the wrong place. Like I am not going to be a 7-foot forward in the NBA. Yeah, that's not the capability that I was born with, or a body that I grew into. So if it's needed to win and it can't be improved, maybe I'm playing in the wrong game, and I should be looking at other sports like golf or football or or ice hockey, some of the sports that I played as a kid. If it can be improved, but it's not needed to win, are we just wasting time, energy, and resource improving things that don't really matter? Again, leveraging 2x2s to help accelerate decision-making. And if you empower your team to think differently about how they use things like 2x2s, how they critically think about the decisions that they're making, and how they work through problem solving, you'll start building that culture from the front line. The next piece I want to get into, and this is just a question I've gotten, I'll open it up to the chat, and you don't need to see the slide here, but it's, do you have guiding principles inside your organization? Does anybody have guiding principles inside their organization? Anybody want to share that in the chat, whether or not you use guiding principles?
Well, for us, it's we help as many entrepreneurs as we can.
Yep.
And our other one is we help those who help us. That's our two guiding principles. So it's fairly simple. John here says we're working on developing guiding principles.
Awesome. So Craig, you said help as many entrepreneurs as you can.
Yep.
As we can. And
we help those who help us.
Help those who help us.
Yeah. And our motto is, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? It's a big ecosystem. Yep.
Awesome. And John, you said you're working on developing guiding principles. What's your process? Do you feel comfortable sharing in the chat how you're going through that process, or why you've decided that it's important to do that? And John, thanks for the interaction.
Yeah, John's not shy.
Okay, good.
I'm sure he'll be.
This is one of those things. So Craig, you shared a little bit earlier about, hey, how do we help people make decisions in the field? How do we help people make decisions at an event? Guiding principles have been a game changer for me. Back when I was leading at a team of 45 people in my last VP of America's role as a W-2, which is what we call it in the States, but when I was employed by another organization that wasn't mine, about 2 years before I left, we implemented guiding principles, and it started to change the way that our team worked. And we didn't do it from an organization level. We did it from a team level, primarily because of the culture I was trying to create within the specific team that was within my span of control. I'm looking at the chat. It says we're actually just getting started. It's a new NFP. What NFP? What's the acronym? Not for profit. Okay, thank you. We're developing everything now. Awesome. So having guiding principles, what they did is they help people in the field make very quick decisions on their own. And even if they made the wrong decision, like let's say something worked out poorly, if they could demonstrate that they went through the guiding principles, checked everything off, then awesome. We did something that aligned with what we do as a business. It didn't work out. Do we need to update our principles, or are we just comfortable with, that not being the right decision from a criteria perspective. Ultimately, what this did for us is it helped, and they'll talk about it in the military. Stanley McChrystal has a book out there called Team of Teams. You'll hear things like decentralized command, commander's intent. How do we deliver information further out beyond our span of control, our scope, our direct access? At an event, if anybody comes in and they're looking for something at the event, first criteria, help as many entrepreneurs as we can. Are they an entrepreneur? Yes or no? If no, sorry, here, I'm going to go ahead and guide you over to somebody else. Here's somebody else that can help you. This is where you can really lean on that broader network, and you can continue to help people out, but not spend time, energy, and resource or allow scope creep relative to your business. If yes, okay, move forward. Are they ones who are helping us? Are they actively engaged in the community? Are they someone who is being an active participant in what we're building? If yes, then okay, let's figure out what mountains we can move. If no, let's find out why. Why are they not an active member of the community? Do they not know? Do they not know how they can help? Have they not considered it? Are they just so focused on doing their own thing? Like whatever it is, what we do is we start to give people the power to make decisions out in the field. And then when they come back and say, hey, here's the decision I made, this is what we move forward with, then we can go through and here's how it worked. Great, we learned, and here's how it didn't work. Okay, let's go back through our principles and see, do we need to add a third one? So was the build process for me with my team over at O'Reilly Media. The first guiding principle was understand the customer better than they understand themselves. Understand the customer better than they understand themselves. And one of the cool things about the B2B space, especially when you know those who's, who has the problem, who cares about the problem, impacted by the problem, who cares about those who have or impacted by the problem. If we as revenue leaders, as founders inside our business, as service providers inside organizations, if we ask those questions and we get information from the perspective of the people that we're serving, we, as an outside person who has an outside lens on it, can actually understand that business better than they understand themselves, because we've seen this happen inside organizations where silos are built. People are focused on their own roles, which is good. They've got to keep those things moving forward relative to the business, but it impacts their perspective when they're trying to think differently about things. So understand the customer better than they understand themselves. If we make a decision and everybody can come back and say, yep, we understood the customer better than they understand themselves, then I'm good with the decision. The next one is deliver the solution in the context of what's important to the customer. Not about us, it's about the customer. So understand customer better than they understand themselves, deliver the solution in the context of what's important to the customer. In order to deliver the solution in the context of what's important, I have to understand the customer better than they understand themselves. Don't limit ourselves based on preconceived notions. Don't come in with a bunch of assumptions. Don't assume some things. Ask questions. Let's gather information. Let's take a beginner's mind approach to the way that we're working with folks. Set expectations and execute flawlessly. Tell people what you're going to do. Go out there and do it. And then the last one, the last one that was added pretty late was let's not turn our problems into the customer's problems. Don't make our problems the customer's problems. And we as leaders will be challenged with that. As we're building leadership inside the organization, how do we empower people to think about solving for their own problems, communicating effectively inside, not us turning around and saying, hey, we need you to get that deal over the line this quarter, because if we don't, we're going to miss our number, and go out there and deliver some kind of a discount, or see if we can trade on some contract language. If the timing is not right for the customer, the timing is not right for the customer. And if we're trying to make our own internal problems the customer's problems, then we're not operating, at least within my guiding principles as an organization. So now everybody knows they can go through a quick checklist and they can say, well, in this interaction, when I had to make a decision to give something to the customer, do some additional work, whatever it might be, did I hit on each of those criteria? This is an area where guiding principles become really important. Now, you can't do this in a vacuum. You have to do this as a team. And if you do this as a team, now we start to rally around the why that Craig was talking about earlier. We make sure that our guiding principles align. Super simple. Help as many entrepreneurs as we can. Help those who help us. We make sure that our guiding principles align. And then when we're out there in the field, we get better at decision making and execution. And if we make mistakes and we went against the criteria, leverage the criteria, then we can determine, does it make sense to change the criteria, add a new critical item like let's not make our problems the customer's problem, or did it just happen that was the way things played out? I'll pause for just a moment and ask if there's any feedback or comments on the guiding principles challenge.
I like all this is important. John says, love this, super helpful.
Good.
So I've got a couple of questions around. Okay, yeah, I agree with all of this. And as a leader, you have some of this in mind, but you have to get it front and center in your team. It can't be dictated. And with our culture of remote, being so remote and not necessarily being around our, how do you do it? And it's got to be more important than ever because people are so isolated. You want to make sure they're making the decisions that align with everyone else and what you're doing.
Yeah. So continue to reinforce it. Share it. Make it as simple as possible. Like simple, fewer words, set expectations and execute flawlessly. Set expectations and execute flawlessly. 5 words in that one guiding principle. Make them as simple as possible, have them build on each other and communicate them often. So one way to look at this, and this is in the logo of Catalyst Acts. There's what looks like, I would call it an area chart. It's ultimately, let's try to avoid boiling the ocean kind of view. But the first one is, let's say guiding principle number 1. Did I understand the customer better than they understand themselves? Yes or no? If no, then go do more work. If yes, let's advance. Am I communicating the solution in the context of what's important to the customer? If no, go back and do some work. If yes, move forward to the next one. Have I limited myself based on preconceived notions? Or am I not limiting myself based on preconceived notions? There's a little bit of a double negative in there. But if I'm not letting those preconceived notions get in the way, then yes, I can move forward. Have I set expectations and executed flawlessly? Am I making the problem, is this our problem that I'm turning into the customer's problem? If so, I should feel confident that I'm moving forward. And it's just this order of operation that we're helping to create for our people so that they can go through really quickly on an index card or on a Post-it note. If they've got it up against their monitor, they can go through that really quickly. Then when it comes to the meetings that you deliver inside the organization and the information that you communicate, make sure that everything you're communicating aligns. Do you understand your employees better than they understand themselves? Have you taken that time to understand the team and the operating environment that you're working with? Are you delivering a solution? Are you communicating something out in the context of what's important to them? If yes, keep going. If you are letting preconceived notions get in the way. So now when you embody these guiding principles, the way that you communicate inside your organization, then people start to rally behind them, come together. We realize, hey, we're all part of team, whatever. We all have the same domain in our email address. So my guidance would be, make sure that the order makes sense. Keep it as simple as possible. When you need to add clarity, add another guiding principle, and then operate in an environment where you're making decisions, working through a decision tree where you get to the end. And if, let's say we can't get to this one, meaning we are making the problem, our problem, the customer's problem, then let's be open with each other around what kind of risk we're comfortable with taking on here. Again, so that we maintain a level of integrity by maintaining focus through lines of clarity. Helpful?
Yes, indeed. I do like the don't make our problem the customer's problem. I
Yeah.
think that's something everyone needs to really think hard about.
So I want to get into the operating system piece here. I know we've only got about 20 minutes or so as we go through. Does anybody, are you using an operating system currently? How many people, like, is anybody using, just throw out the operating system, or if I mention it out loud, if you're using these, just include that in the chat. But anybody using OKRs, objectives and key results? That's the John Doerr thing. It comes from his work with Andy Grove and Intel, and the book Measure What Matters. How about Gino Wickman, EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System? Anybody using that? Worked for a company that used OKRs. They were very helpful. Good. Thanks, John. How about those who go way, way back, and like my gray hair, the MBOs, management by objectives. So things like having a balanced scorecard type thing integrated into an organization. And then another new one, anybody familiar with MIND, understanding your most important number and drivers. That's a Lee Benson operating system.
We're
So I
familiar
saw
with some of
OKRs.
those. Yeah. EOS is fairly popular these days. And generally when I'm coaching people, I don't get them into a specific operating system, but we talk about KPIs and which ones are going to move the needle for the business and tracking those.
Yeah. And why are those KPIs important?
Well, it depends on different for each business, because one, what you focus on is what improves, right? So
Yeah.
I think that is the key. And,
Yeah.
when I'm coaching, I ask people to pick 3 so we can know more than that at the first, so we can, okay, how do we improve these things?
Yep.
Are they moving the needle? Like it's more leads, more qualified leads, more customers, more sales, more this, more that,
Yeah.
so we can quantify it, we can target it, and we know it's actionable.
Yes. And do you find that people typically are comfortable with their KPIs, or they struggle with KPIs? Like, what's your experience there?
I think the first couple are easy to define because I have a list of them. We go through about like 50 and then that really triggers people to say, oh, okay.
Sure.
But after that, it's harder.
Yeah. What do you think the most common challenge is with that kind of stuff? Like why does it get harder after that?
Because people are working in the business, not on the business.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. John, we'll open it up to you too. Any thoughts that you'd like to add, either to any of the questions I just asked Craig? So, one of the challenges that I see over and over again, it drives me nuts. I see people have a number of performance indicators, but struggle with determining which ones are actually key, or how those actually align with the broader objectives of the business, the thing that they want to accomplish. And I think it's really cool, Craig, that you mentioned the importance of 3. And there are these rules of 3 that exist out there. OKRs, objectives, key results. MBOs, managing by objectives. The reason I've adopted rule of 3 as a way to go is that if I try to do anything more than 3, I get lost and I can lose track of things, and it's harder to make decisions around what we're working on. Like when we go through that problem solving framework, that hexagon, if it doesn't align with the general objectives of the business, like the problem that we're looking to solve or the problem that's been put in front of us, if it doesn't align with our general objectives of the business, should we even be spending time, energy, or resource on it? Should we just dismiss it, cut it out, move it to the side because or put things in the parking lot because it's something we can get to at another point in time? It is very important I believe it's very important for people to have a goal. have an objective, have a kind of a North Star that they're working toward. Craig, when you talk about help as many entrepreneurs as possible, is one of your key metrics, total number of entrepreneurs that you're able to help in any given year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of your objectives, I would imagine, for the year is to increase that number. If you helped 100 in 2022, you want to help 120 in 2023 or something to that effect. Is that fair?
Yes.
High level of clarity. So then you can go back through and say, the goal is to help 120 entrepreneurs as an example. And I use this just as an example here. All right. If we want to go from 100 to 120, if we're working on things that don't align with helping more entrepreneurs, then we should feel really comfortable with people inside our organization saying no. People on the front line saying, hey, Craig, I don't believe that aligns with our objective. Or can you show me how that aligns with our objective and determine whether or not we want to spend time, energy, or resource. The other challenge, the other thing that happens when you get into KPIs for me would come over here. So we've got our goal, this objective that we're getting toward. Then we've got our performance indicators that indicate whether or not we're gaining progress. And this ends up being a lot of metrics. And sometimes there's just a lot of data that we're keeping track of. Some of it might be activity data. There's this big gap between the data, and I use the word metrics. There's this big gap between the data and the goal. So what I see people struggle with, and what I would challenge you to work through relative to any of the goals that you're working on right now and the way that you're building out your specific operating system for your organization, when you're managing those processes and people and how things are moving around and managing the overall work that's happening, is identify that strategy. And for me, strategy, the actions, the cluster of actions. What's our strategy? How we will get to the goal? What are the 3 key things that we're going to do to get to the goal? In the context of generating revenue, it might be, hey, how are we going to generate demand? How are we going to generate money, acquisition? What are we going to do to grow our referral group? So demand, acquisition, growth might be the 3. It might be, if we're focused on a specific goal related to marketing, it might be something like one-to-many, one-to-one, direct outreach, and referral partners. But what are the 3 strategies that we're going to apply to help us get closer to that goal, so that now we can align those KPIs directly with the specific strategy and determine, are we working on things that are super important? Like, are we working on things that fall outside of this criteria that we've set up? And if so, why is that happening? Why are we allowing it to happen? If we are doing all of the work that we said we're going to do, all of our metrics look good, but we're not getting closer to our goal, at what point do we fire some of the work? Do we just say, hey, that strategy is not for us, or the tactics associated with that strategy aren't working effectively? When you start to break these things down into groups of 3 and you start to nest within, you'll gain a higher level of clarity inside your organization about how the work that people are doing actually aligns with the strategy of the organization, and how that strategy is getting us closer to delivering our goal, so that you never get into a situation where someone at the front end of the organization is asking the question, why am I doing this? Or struggles with answering this question: how does your work align with the broader objectives of the business? Because there are some people that are out there, especially in this remote environment that we're talking about, who are doing a lot of work, they're working really hard, but they aren't fulfilled in the work because they struggle with seeing where that work actually aligns with the broader objective. So this is my game plan: goals, actions, metrics, drive execution. And that's the operating system that I use for my business and will implement inside organizations. All of these things have different are different flavors of each other. The Marie Antoinette quote is one of my favorites, which is, "There's nothing new except what has been forgotten." There is nothing new except what has been forgotten. We see as far as we see because we stand on the shoulders of giants. That's an Isaac Newton quote. Stand on the shoulders of giants, leverage some of these capabilities. And what I typically see, if we talk about biggest mistakes or most common mistakes, people go from the goal to the metrics, or the goal to the work, and they aren't super clear inside the organization around the strategy. And if you've got more than 3 ways that you're looking at addressing that goal, you're probably doing too much. If you're inside your organization, you're asking the question, are we doing enough? Are we doing as much as we can? Are we doing whatever? You're asking the wrong question. You're never going to be doing enough. You won't ever be, there always is going to be an opportunity for you to do something more. But if you don't have frameworks and processes in place, like the ones that we talked about before, you're going to get into situations where your people are really struggling with making decisions in the field, advancing things with your customers, and moving your business forward. And the more that they do this on their own, the more autonomy you give them through giving them the tools and frameworks and systems to support it. The fewer blind spots you're going to create inside your organization, the better leaders you'll create from the front line, and the more pushback you should get from those folks to address the challenge that John just mentioned, which is, we are probably doing too much. And I would say you probably are doing too much. And the next question would be, what would happen if, and this comes from Jim Collins, you stop what you would not start? What would happen if? That actually comes from Drucker, and it's in Jim Collins' foreword to The Effective Executive. But if you stop what you would not start again, you understand your strategy, and you would not take that strategy again, what happens if you stop that? What freedom does that give you to focus time, energy, and attention on the things that work? I want to thank everybody for the time today. I hope this was valuable. Craig, any questions as we wrap up?
This was great. It's very valuable, super valuable. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think people are doing too much. Motion is not the same thing as progress. Like this is I repeat to people and they look at you funny when you say that. You don't need to tweet 20 times a day if that's not moving the bottom line for you. Why are you wasting your time?
Right.
I like what you've talked about here, because people do set goals, they set KPIs, and they don't know how to get there. And that's part of the strategies. We say, okay, how are we getting there? Always be testing. What's going to move the needle for us? What tests are in the pipeline? This is fantastic stuff.
Yeah, that goal, that's the objective. The work, those are the tactics. And that thing in the middle that we tend to forget, we talk about out loud, but we miss. I don't know that many of us even know how to spell it, but it's strategy. What is our strategy, and how do we determine in the middle, like when we're in the frame, inside the frame, how do we step backwards and determine, are we actually working on the right things at the right time in the right order? And this is where our definitions around general strategy is really going to help us. And it's going to serve as a reminder as you pull each of these things together: your operating system, your goals, objectives, strategy, tactics, your guiding principles to accelerate decision-making, and then your frameworks that you use for problem solving and decision-making, those 2x2s. When you put all of those together, you will create amazing leaders from the front line. And I think if you look at, actually, I'm certain, because I see this over and over again. If you go through and you look at some of the people that you've hired recently inside your organization, if they're struggling in the work that they're doing, if you don't feel like you're getting everything, they're not fulfilled, you're not getting everything that you think you can out of those folks, check against these questions. What is your problem solving framework for the people on the front line? Do they have one? If they don't, let's give them one. How do you make decisions? What's your process? If they don't have one, let's give them one. What are your guiding principles as an individual? If you haven't taken the time to do it, let's work through the value on building those. I put up a QR code here. When you click on that link or open up the QR code, it'll give you just a quick survey. I'm looking for feedback on these kind of sessions, both the sessions I do live and in person and the ones I do virtually. That feedback is a gift for me. It helps me iterate and change and start to think about, what do I want to remove out of a discussion like this? What do I want to build more on? So please share that feedback. There will also be a link there so that you can go to the free resources that are available on findmycatalyst.com. If you want want to connect with me directly, head to findmycatalyst.com. That's where I'm moving everybody. I'm going through this whole process as well, which is helping simplify the way that I'm communicating stuff out to the market, and everything is there through findmycatalyst.com. Craig, that is all that I had.
That's fantastic. It's been wonderful. Rajiv here says he's been learning about different operating systems available. Thank you very much. It's been very insightful, and people need to take a step back. Like I said, when you start KPIs, you're talking about sales, but at some point you realize that the problems are further inside your organization, and you need to work on your business instead of, selling.
Yeah. You gotta ask and just ask those questions, like get into that Eisenhower matrix piece around the things that are important, but not urgent. This kind of on the business work is not urgent. It's not happening in the day to day. It doesn't feel like you have to do it tomorrow. Block out time 2 to 3 weeks from now. Defend that time 2 to 3 weeks from now. Get work that time on your business, and it will pay off dividends. I assure you.
Thank you very much for your time. I know you got a hard stop. I'm sure people will be reaching out to you. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Mike.
Awesome. Craig, thanks for having me. And thanks everybody for watching and listening and coming back to me with questions. Thank you.
Thanks again, Mike. Talk soon.